Okay, so hello everyone. So today, as we know, we will be talking about web application and bug bounty. So today we'll be talking about few things like the revision of all the 5 videos that we have seen. I will be clearing doubts and then I will be move forward with more detail in cross-site scripting, because cross-site scripting and SQL injection, these two are the very basic, easily exploitable, and the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities from past 10 years. Okay, so injections like command injections, SQL injections, cross-site scripting, these are OWASP's top 10 vulnerability in past few years. So for now, I will be asking you all, do you have any questions from the videos you have just watched, which I have shared? And you can just unmute yourself and talk to me. No need to write in the group. Okay, tell me how many of you have watched the videos, because I was once a student and I know how easily I can ignore a link or any video. So it's all right if you have not seen, but at least you can tell us that yes, you have not watched the video. Okay, so how many of you have not watched the videos? If you don't tell me, how would I know have if you have watched or not? I will skip that part. Otherwise, I won't skip that part. Am I even audible? Hello?
Yes, Harshit, you're audible.
Okay, if you won't interact easily, you won't understand. I will keep skipping parts. I will just be talking alone and you won't understand anything. So it's better that you unmute yourself and try to talk to me.
Hey, Harshit sir, will you please explain sequencer once again?
Yeah, I will go to that part. I will revise everything, but before that, I just wanted to ask how many of you have watched the video.
Harshita, Veda Vikas is saying that he was sick and so he couldn't watch the video.
I thought, then what's the issue? He can just unmute himself and just talk to me here. I said it is easy to understand if you can talk. Okay, so let's start. Okay, leave this part. If you are not talking, I will not force you to. Okay, so is everything clear with the web application part? How a web application work and how why we need to secure a website and other things. Is that part clear to everyone? Okay, again no answer.
Guys, please do use the voice. It's very difficult to keep track of everything via message. And Harshita is teaching, right? He's not able to keep track of the Telegram group. So if you please unmute yourself and please talk to him.
Okay, forget everything, don't talk. Okay, let's start. So what we have discussed till now in the videos was how a web application works. Okay, so let's suppose this is a website. So when I go to this tab, that is inspect element, so here we get a network tab. So in network tab, what we can see is we can see the requests that are going to the web server when we try to open a website. So when I try to open a website, these are the requests. I will try to zoom in. So these are the requests. You can just see this 200, 304, 304, 204, 304, the methods, the domain name, the file, the cause, type, and the bits transferred and the actual size. So what is this? So status code I have already discussed in the videos. There are different status code just to understand how a server responded to our query, our requests. So if we get a status code of 2xx, what 2xx means, like 2xx means 201, 202, 200, 203, 204, like 200, and again you can see 204. So these status codes mean the server understood our request and serving the response. So when the server serves our response successfully, so we get a 2xx status code. So the other case is 3xx, that is 301, 302, 303 and other things. So what 3xx status code is, so when we get redirected to some other domain, when we try to get something, when we fetch something from a different origin, cross origin, this is called cross origin resource sharing. When we share some resource from a different origin, we get a status code of 304, 302, 301 and all other things are for redirection, but 300 is for some other redirection, 301 is for some other redirection and specified. 4xx, the next status code is 4xx, that is 400, 401, 402, 403. These are the status code when the server could not understand the query or the request made by the client. So this is basically called the client side errors. So in client side errors we get these types of responses of 400, 401, 402, and the last is 5xx. So what is 5xx kind of like errors? So it is basically server side error. When the server could not serve our request, we get like a 5xx errors. Let's suppose a server is too busy and it cannot fetch something, or there is something which server understand but it cannot deliver to the client, then we get a server response, server error, that is 5xx. Okay, so this part is clear. The domain, everybody know what a domain is. There are different methods how we interact to the server. So their methods are get method, post method, and then delete, push, update, and these methods are used for different purposes. For get method, we are trying to get something from the server. In post method, we are trying to push something to the server, and in return we want a request. Let's suppose you are filling up a form, so you are trying to write some random data like name, email address, etc. in the field, and then you send it, and then the server gives a response. So in that case a post method is used. If you want to delete something from server, a delete method is used. So these are the different methods. In the file you can see the actual file it is using. So this is the file, this is, you can see this logo, you can see this part, my profile photo for the Google. This is being loaded in this request. There are different domains and different requests which are being used. This is for the JS file, that is api.js. so there are number of requests and responses required. Okay, so when we visit a page, this page has many contents. This page has this image, this vector, this Google's logo, a search bar, this search button. So everything it is fetched individually, all CSS files, JS file, and these all things are fetched individually. So these are the number of requests the server sees when we try to get something and we request something from the browser. And the cause is the simple things why we are trying to get that is image file or beacon file, or it is sub document or JS file or a script, whatever that is. Transferred bit is the actual bit transferred to fetch that file, and size is the actual size. So why there is a difference between transferred data and the actual size? Because I generally keep on opening Google every day. So what my browser does is my browser cache some of the things. So that's why the transferred data is less and the actual size of the data is more. So few things were cached, so it does not require more size to get the rest of the part, but the actual size was still more than like 192 kbs, and the rest about 130 kbs it was already cached in my browser. Okay, so when this part is clear, I will be moving to Burp Suite. So what Burp Suite is, I have already discussed everything from the Burp Suite. So till now, anyone have any question? Till then, I am opening Burp Suite. So if you have any question, you can just unmute your mic and talk to me.
So,
Yes.
is the main difference between domain name system and domain name server? Is
Okay. Domain name system and domain name server. So domain name system and domain, they are two different things. What a DNS server is, earlier, like 20 or 25 years back, uh, we do not have a like smartphone. So what we generally did was, we had a phone book directory in which every number was mapped with different, every name was mapped with a number, like the name and the number, the name and the number. So domain name server is the same thing, where every domain name like google.com, facebook, and what, every single domain is mapped with its IP address. So the, okay, I will show you something. Okay, so when I type in my browser, that is google.com, you can see my screen, I see this page. Okay, so what I will do is, I will just try to get the IP address of google.com. So this, here I can see the IP address of google.com is, okay, here 172.217. This is the IP address. So even if I type in the IP address, I will still be able to access Google. If I go and I type in the IP address and I search, only Google will open. Why? So since DNS was introduced, because it's not possible to remember hundreds of IP addresses. Can you imagine, like, can you remember every IP address for every domain? So that's why it was introduced. So yeah, we just because human brains can like remember names, we can remember Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and everything, but we cannot remember different IP addresses. And for Google, there are more than 10 IP addresses, because Google has a huge database, and the huge traffics are transferred every second. So Google has different IP addresses to serve its customers. So it's not possible for us to like remember everything. So this is basically DNS, why DNS is. And domain name system, this is the same thing, we just call it different. Domain name system is the system of how DNS works. This is a system of things, how a query a query goes and a query comes. So we have heard about TCP and UDP, you're right?
yes, sir.
Okay, so in TCP, if we are just writing google.com in our browser, if I write just google.com, so what will happen is, first of all, this google.com will be resolved to its IP address, and then we will give a request to the server. Okay, I am requesting the server with this IP address. So if we use TCP connection, we just need around 43 different number of request and response just to get the IP address. Because you know, in TCP connection is established, connection is established when, before like sharing data, before any request and response, a connection is established. And once we are done with our data sharing and everything, we terminate the connection. So for there, like, we need 3 requests for connecting to the server, and 4 requests for terminating the connection: SYN, SYNAC, and SYN for connection establishment, and FIN-ACK for the termination of the current connection. So there are 7 extra additional data packets which are being sent in TCP, and this is done 4 times. When we try to connect to the resolver, then we connect to the root server, then again we try to go to the top level domains and other services, and there are 28 extra requests and response we fetch. So that's why this is not done. So domain name system like collects everything, how this should function and why this should not function. So that's why we basically use UDP, because in UDP we do not need to like create establish secure connection, then we do not need to terminate a connection. We just give a request to the resolver, it gives back a response. We give a response to the request to the root server, it gives back us a response. That's it. Okay, so I was talking about Burp Suite. Okay, so this is the community version of the Burp Suite. This will look like this. My version is a bit older, there may be few changes in the latest update. So I have already discussed these things. This is the dashboard where you can see these things are for professional versions, like you can see these things, what are the issues with the actual domain. Okay, so I will show everything. Let me set up my proxy. Okay, so you can, there are two steps to set up the proxy, which I have already discussed in the videos. To configure your browser and the Bubsuit together, you can open that video and watch. So you can, let's suppose when I configured the browser and I try to visit Google, so this is not doing anything, the requests are being halted at here. So now let's see. So this is the request which you can see. Let's forward the request. Okay, so this is the get kind of request. We are requesting for the slash, yani that is the home page. The request is HTTP 1.1 is the version. So this is the actual request. This is the first request which we are requesting to Google. So in proxy tab, what we can do is we intercept. There is a tab called intercept where we can see the intercepted request. Okay, so this is the intercepted request. We can forward the packet if you want that this request should go to the server, and we can drop the packet if you don't want this request to go to the server. If we turn the intercept off, no data packet will be halted and everything will be sent directly to the server. Okay, there's HTTP history. Every single page where the request is being sent, we can see here, and these all things I have covered in the video, so I won't be wasting much time here. The intruder is used for attacks. I will show how. I have not shown in the video, but how we do that you can go and watch in the video. For the repeater tab, we can see exact request and response in the real time. Let's suppose this is the page which we intercepted. Okay, so right click and send it to repeater. So when I send it to repeater, I can see the actual request. This is the actual request which I sent to the repeater. So what if I click send and we see the response? I see it is 301 moved permanently. Why this moved permanently? Because I searched for google.com. You can see google.com, but what I'm getting is https://www.google.com. So actually this is not the actual website which we are opening. We are being permanently moved to this website, right? Okay, if we follow the redirection, we can see there is a 302 redirection which is being redirected to this page, google.com/this, but this is not permanent. We are getting something from this domain and then we are just using it on the actual website. Again, we follow the redirection, we can see 200 status code. Okay, so after these two redirections, we get the actual Google page. This is the actual source code of the Google page. Okay, so in the repeater, what we do is we actually can see the exact request and the response in the real time. I can change something in the request. Let's suppose I just try to change this to anything like facebook.com. This is not a good way to do. I am just showing you. Okay, I just say GWS_RD is equal to facebook.com. What I see is I see Google understands this is a bad request and this should not be fulfilled. So this is the client side error. This is what we tried to manipulate and we get a 400 bad request. So we have discussed why we get a 4xx kind of request when a client does something wrong, something misses something. You can see there is a response. Your client has issued a malformed or illegal request. Okay, we can just right click and we can go show response in browser. We can copy this URL, and when we go to the browser, we can just paste in the link. Sorry, we can paste in the link and we can see the response. That's an error, and this was the line which I showed you in this Bubsuit. Your client has issued a malformed or illegal request. Okay, so we have discussed these things. Let's turn off the intercept for now. Okay, sequencer, you can just use sequencer to, like, let's suppose you log into a system. Okay, so when you log into a system, you get different kinds of cookies and other stuffs, right? Every time you try to log in, you get your cookies, you get your session ID, you get different information which is specially for you. Okay, so when I log in to like I have already logged in to Google in this web browser. Okay, so you can see I have already if I go to a new tab and I again try to access Google, I will still be logged in. Why? Because my browser has the session cookie. So if I am using this PC, I am using this browser, and I have a session cookie in this browser, what I can do is I can go to any tab and I will still be able to access my account. Why? Because I am using the same session cookie. That's why session cookie is really important. We should not like reveal session cookie to anyone. So if I go and if I open my incognito tab and I still try to open google.com, I won't be logged in, because in incognito the browser does not like store any of the cookie or the cache. So that's why I won't be logged in here. So in sequencer, why we use is, let's suppose there is a web application, a simple kind of web application which is newly made and not as sophisticated and secure as Google. Let's suppose there is some website abc.com and some random developer who has not good experience in development made that website. So every time someone user logs in, the source code has been written something like that, ki the session cookie will be like this: the timestamp, the user ID, and some random 3-digit number. Okay, if a user logs in 10 times and you see that, okay, so the session cookie is changing like the login time, and then there is some special character, then there is the user ID, and then there is a special character, and then there is some 3-digit random number. So what you can understand is, okay, so this is how the session cookie is changing. So if I want to log in as you, what I will do is I will just write the exact timestamp I am logging in. I will give that special character, I will give your user ID, and I will try 100 times or 999 times, because there are only possible characters with 3-digit random number. So there will be a one possible chance when I will be able to log into your account. I will be taking over your session. So the sequencer is used for that purposes. Like you can just see the changes happening in these things like session cookies or any other things. Decoder is used to encode or decode data. So most of the session cookies, this is not the case with the very sophisticated and secure web application, but yes, with 80% of the web application, the session cookies are encoded in base 64. Base 64 is a language in which we basically encode anything. So how we can identify that there is something which is encoded in base 64? Because when we encode anything in base 64, there will be a equal to symbol in the ending. This when we encode anything that is a plain text to base 64, there will be at least one equal to in the end. So we can identify that is a base 64, and we can just come here, we can paste in the session cookie like anything and equal to, and we will just try to decode that, and when we decode that we will get something. This is a random value, so I am not getting any exact number, but if there will be something exact value which has been converted to base 64, I will be getting a value. So how you basically get a value? Let's suppose there is a browser, there is a website, and it is storing the session cookies and the details in base 64. So you may get the email ID, the password hash, or maybe the exact password it is if it is not stored properly. So this is what we do with the decoder. In comparer, we can like add 2, 3 or any number of items and we can compare. So what comparer does is, let's suppose I send this to comparer, so the request and the response will go to the comparer. I will add something else to my repeater. I will see the request and response, and I cannot identify what are the differences. That this is a small response and small request, so I can just see. But what if the request and the response is very huge? So we can just send it to comparer and we can compare. It will highlight the changes. The extended is basically used to add extensions. So I had one extension, but I just changed the path, so it is not showing up here. So if you add an extension, it will show up in your tab with these things like repeater, sequencer, decoder. So if I change this path, that is the wrong path, I will be able to access a different tab that will be named threshold. You can check this on GitHub. This is made by, I don't know the name, I forgot the name, but this is a really good extension if you want to hunt for cross-site scripting and SQL injection. And there are user options which you can use to customize everything based upon your usability, and there are project options which you also can just customize based on your usability. So with this we conclude the websuite part very fastly, because we need to discuss more important things today. So if anyone has any question, she can ask me. She can. Okay, anyone has any question? Okay, so you can tell me to move forward if you don't have any questions, right?
Harshita, move forward.
Okay.
Okay, we have one question.
Okay, do we have question?
I think someone just spoke up above.
I guess Om spoke up. Om, do you have a question? Okay, so let's continue. So the most important thing is today we will be discussing is cross-site scripting. So I have already recorded few videos which I will be explaining you. Okay, so this is, let's see this. Okay, so let's suppose this is a website which is a testing website made only with the purpose of testing. So this is testphp.vulnerweb.com. You can just open it in your browser later. So when you open up this web browser, what you can see is it is just like a normal browser which I have already opened. Oh sorry, normal website. Okay, right. So this is a search bar, browse categories, artists, the cart options, sign up options, profile, and other things. So how cross-site scripting works is, okay, if we go to the source code, okay, so have you ever seen something like this? Let me show you. Have you ever seen any errors in any HTML code? Like if you try to write any HTML code, if the browser understands it, it will execute. If it does not understand, it will skip that, but it will never give an error. Why? Because there is no compilation process in HTML. Like if you write a C++ code or any Python code, it gets compiled before processing, so you get an error. But HTML5 is never compiled, HTML5 or JavaScript. So what we can do is we can just try to, if we can write anything in between any of the two tabs. If I write anything between body tab, or if I write between h1 and the h6 tab, if I write between table or td, so that will be executed. The browser will understand that okay, this is the part of the source code, and it will get executed. So let's suppose if I go here and if I try to write something, let's suppose if I write hello there, so what I see is searched for hello there. I see that what I have searched for. If I go to any website, okay, I won't be showing it on any live websites. Okay, so if you go to any website and you search for anything, if you search for something, there are a 90% possibility that you will see the exact word that you are searching for. If you go to a website, any shopping website, or if you go to some websites which deliver groceries and you search for something, you will see the search results for this, or search if you searched for this and not found. So everything we search for, it is either shown in the test query field or the URL, or it will either be shown on the website. So here it is shown in the website, the actual front end. So if I go to the source code and if I try to search for hello there, okay, so this is where I wrote my script. I wrote whatever I wrote, it is being shown here in between h2 tags. Okay, so we can see that whatever we are writing, we can see it is shown between h2 tags. So what if I write something in between these h2 tags? Okay, so since this is a div tag, this is a div tag, and this is a div tag, and h2 tags are working between these two div tags. So what if I write a different kind of tag, a script tag or h1 tag or anything in between these h2 tags? It will still get executed, because the browser will think that okay, this is something a part of the web application. So if I go and I write a simple script, I will give you the scripts and all later, don't worry. So if I write a simple script, I will see a pop-up like this website has been hacked. This is just for simple pop-up. If I write the same script but for the cookies, if the cookies will be available, I will be able to see that. So if we go and write that for the cookie, okay, so there is no cookie with the browser because I have not logged in, so I am not getting anything here. But if, let's suppose, if there has been any cookies with the web application, so what I will see is I will see a list of all the cookies which is present with my current account. So this is how cross-site scripting works. So the basics are how we can inject something in the web application. Let's suppose if Google is so secure, still I will show you something. Let's suppose if I search for weather in this, okay, so if you just read the URL, you will still be able to see that part which you have searched. So here, so what we searched for is being reflected here. So we cannot try cross-site scripting on Google because it is highly secured and it is sanitizing our input. But if you try to search anything, it will be shown either in the URL or in the web application or anywhere. You just need to give your input. If I give any input here, random input, what I will see is I don't see anything. But that might be possible that I can see this thing somewhere in my source code. Okay, let's suppose if I copy this thing and if I go to the source code and if I try to find that, okay, this is not present. But this may be possible that whatever you are trying to search is not present in the URL or the front end part, but it may be present in the back end part somewhere which is not being shown. So you can just need to find a parameter where you can inject something so that the it reaches to the server and it can get interpreted. So let's move to the video part. So okay, so this is the website where we were talking about. So let's move forward. This is the part I discussed about. This is the search bar, and if I search for something, I get to see that exact word here. If I go to the source, view source, and I see, okay, this part is getting reflected here, this part is getting reflected. So what I can do, I can try to inject something, inject a script, inject some HTML document, inject some login field. What if I inject a login field here? If someone opens this website, he will say, okay, log into your account, and he will be logging into his account. And when he logs into his account, what will happen? The password and the email ID will come to me. We just need to customize the script that way. Okay, there are a few more different examples for cross-site. So this is the first part of cross-site scripting, that is reflected cross-site scripting. So it is only available when you are sharing the link, and it will be only limited to a single user. But there is a different kind of cross-site scripting, that is stored cross-site scripting. So let's suppose you open up a website, you just go to somewhere like our guest book. Okay, So let's suppose you open up a website, you open up any website and you see a review page there, like write a review. So when we write any review, when we write something, okay, this product was good or whatever, when we write, what happens is this thing goes to the server, because every user can see this and at any moment of time, at any point of time. So what is happening is this is going to the server. So if the web application or the server is not treating this as just strings and it can take it as a script, what will happen is every user who is just opening that page will be affected. If I inject a login form here, if I just write a source code, a script for login form here, and I submit this, and I add this message, what will happen is this message will be stored in the server and anyone visiting this page will be seeing that thing. Okay, so this is stored cross-site scripting, and for stored cross-site scripting, a huge number of people are affected. So let me give you an example. So I was testing for a website, I won't name that website. So I was an intern there. So that when in that website there was a page where product details page, like Flipkart and Amazon has that page. So we have few options. We were able to submit our ratings, like how many ratings we want to give out of 5, and how many ratings, what is the exact review we want to give. So ratings tab was just an option, like there were 5 stars and we need to select 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 stars there. And in the review tab we can write anything. So where I can write anything, I injected a cross-site scripting, and that was stored to the server, and it was executed every time whenever any visitor of the website visits that page. Cool. So this is where the stored cross-site scripting can be found. Anything which is going to the server and being stored there, that can be a potential parameter, the potential, what you can say is a potential like threat vector, attack surface, where you can go and just try to attack. And don't underestimate any parameter. Okay, why we should never underestimate any parameter, let me tell you. So when I was talking about that website, so it has ratings parameter. I can just select stars. What I was able to select was just stars. So when I select 3 stars and when I intercept this request in Burp Suite, what I see is my request was not going as stars, but my request was going as plain text, like 1, 2, these things. So what I did was I just removed that one, I injected a SQL query, and it just got stuck there, and every time the website freezes, everyone opening that page, the website froze for everyone. So okay, so if there is a ratings parameter, so how we can secure these things? So if there is a ratings parameter and we are only allowed to give ratings of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, the web server should not accept anything except for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I was writing my script, I was using ABCD to Z, I was using special characters, I was using everything, and the web server was accepting that. When web server knows that this is the field for ratings and the users are only allowed to enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, why the server should accept everything? So this is where a term called whitelist comes. So what is whitelist? In whitelists you allow a certain characters only. So let's suppose there is a sign up page and you have an option to write your phone number. So can your phone number start, end or anything with ABCD or the special characters? No, it cannot. So if there is a parameter called phone numbers, the web server should only accept 0 to 9. This is how you secure. And if there is a parameter called like add a message, so in a message I can use everything. I can use full stop, exclamation mark, like special characters, I can use A to Z, I can use anything, I can use numbers. So in that case what I can do is we can use whitelists. Okay, what we can do is we can use blacklists. What is blacklist is? In blacklist we block certain special characters. Let's suppose if I am writing a review, I I may use a greater than symbol or less than symbol, but any script is starts with a greater than symbol and ends with a less than symbol, so I will not allow the user to send it, even if it is certainly like really important. Like there is a website of a maths question and they're asking ki write your question down here, then it is like important that they should allow equal to, greater than, less than, full stop, front slash, dividing, star for multiplication. So what they can do is they can use sanitization. So what a sanitization is, you can just go to HTML encoding and you will see oh shit, okay, hold on, the proxy is on. Okay, so when I open this HTML character set for W3 schools or anything, so what encoding means? Encoding means converting a sample character, a single or a special character or a word, to HTML encodings, which will only be understood by the browser but won't be executed. So how is this done is there are different methods we can use to do. So these are the special characters and these are the other special characters, and everything can be sanitized. Okay, there is no method to sanitize here. You can see here the HTML entity encoder and decoder, where you can encode and decode anything and you can see how the browser behaves. Let's suppose you are in this page. Let's suppose if I enter here like greater than symbol and less than symbol and I search, this is greater than, control F and okay, so okay, where is that thing? Okay, here. So I searched for greater than less than symbol, which is shown here in the blue color. Okay, so this is being passed as a plain text. I wrote this thing greater than less than and it is passed as a plain text, but if I write that thing in Google, it won't be passed in a plain text. Like there are certain websites which encode and decode that. So how like this encoding and decoding is done, that a greater than symbol can be converted to let me show you, can be converted to ampersand LT semicolon. So this is how you can write a greater than symbol. So if the web application or the browser is sanitizing your greater than symbol to ampersand LT, it won't be executed, because if I go here and if I see that it is written ampersand LT, ampersand LE and semicolon, so do you think this will be executed? No, so this won't be executed. So there are these three methods to cope up with cross-site scripting. First thing is of using whitelist, second thing is using blacklist, third thing is using proper sanitization. There are many methods for the sanitization. What we need to do is we need a proper sanitization. Let's suppose there is an HTML encoding for greater than less than symbols. What if I write the whole script in binary? That might be passed and executed. What if I write that script in any other language? There are more than 6 to 10 HTML encodings. So what if the sanitization is done for 1 or 2 encodings and the rest 8 encodings are being passed? So we need to try everything. So you can go to OWASP cheat sheet and you can see everything, how to bypass cross-site scripting and everything. In this cheat sheet you can download the site here. You can the cheat sheet for cross-site scripting. Yes, okay, so this is the OWASP's cheat sheet. Okay, so here you can use these different scripts to bypass like any web applications cross-site scripting. If these scripts don't work, then nobody will work. See, this is a different kind of HTML encoding. Can you see this ampersand has 001 0066? These are different kinds of encoding. There is one more kind of encoding, let me show you. So if a web application is like, this is the greater than symbol, okay, so let's suppose the web application, what it is doing is it is converting this thing to ampersand LT. Let's suppose it is just sanitizing this part. So there are different methods which you can use to bypass this. So what is that? That is, I just show you, give me a moment. Okay, yes, so this is like HTML encoder and decoder. You can use these things. You can use ampersand LT, SCR, ampersand LT. You can just remove this. This will be a different encoding. This will be a different encoding. This will be a different encoding. There are different encodings which you can use. Okay, if I go back, I go to HTML char sets, and in the character set you can see, let me show you one thing. You can see this thing. Okay, you see this thing, A. There are Latin capital letters A with grep. So if there is a website, so there are people who may be using this from a different country, so they may write A as this. Okay, if I am an Indian, I will be writing A as simple A. But what if in a Latin country someone is visiting a website, he might write A as this. So what in a web application is does that if a character looks similar, treat it like A. Okay, if I have an option to select options, if there is a parameter and I need to search something, so in that list there is apple written somewhere, okay, and I need to search that apple. Okay, so if I write apple as an English guy, as an Indian, I will get the result. But what if a Latin guy writes apple with this A, this E, so he won't be getting that apple. Why? But because the characters won't match. So in web application what it is does is it is configured like this, like if characters look similar, that is treated as the same thing. If this is looks like similar to A, it will be treated as A. So it is not does on the basis of like look alike. There is a encoding, there is a code which you just saw, ampersand LT or ampersand LT or E. So there is a code for every character. So if these codes will convert to A. So what if we write a script like this is a greater than symbol, but what if I write a greater than symbol for Latin? I cannot write using my keyboard, but if I, let's suppose if I inject a script using the greater than, less than symbols and parentheses which are used in Latin, it won't be converted because like source code has been written that only sanitize these things, but they won't be sanitizing the exact part. They won't be sanitizing this thing and the script will get executed. So how this works is this works in 3 phases. Let me show you. The first part is, let's suppose this is a script, okay, and the source code has been configured that this should be like converted to anything special character like this, less than symbol is like converted to anything, okay, and then if like this script is converted to this, what we will see is this script and then this part. So this is how it will be passed to the web application if I write this thing, okay. If these special characters are converted to this and this, I will see my script like this in web application. So what if I write this equal to symbol in Latin? So the source code will try to sanitize it, but the source code has been written like that only sanitize greater than symbol and not sanitize the Latin greater than symbol. So what will happen is this greater than symbol in Latin will be passed in this, and then this will convert it to this because it has been configured that look-alike symbol should be same as the original symbol. So this is the Latin part, this is the Latin part which has not been sanitized, and this is the original greater than symbol which has been converted. So this is how you can manipulate different things in cross-site scripting. Okay, so we have done with the cross-site scripting part. So if anyone has any question regarding XSS, they can ask. Okay, anyone has any question regarding cross-site scripting, since this is really important and there is many different concepts. This is just like 2% of the cross-site scripting. The moment you start practicing this, you will start learning different things.
No questions so far, Ashita.
Okay, no questions, it's all right. Okay, so next we will be discussing few more things today. So I will be discussing SQL injection. Okay, let me show. The second thing is SQL injection. So how SQL injection is done. So please nobody try on this website, as I was authorized to try on this website, but you are not. So please don't try on this, you may be in some legal consequences. Okay, so there is a login field, okay, where I can just write my email address and I can write my password. Okay, so when I just write a and write some random password and I click on login, what I see is I see a request, I intercept a request. As I have already told you, these types of login forms or forms which we submit goes as a post request. So this is the post request where I am trying to go to home login, the HTTP requests and the version, the website and everything else, the referrer and all things. So this is my cookie, this is my token for this session. This is the email which I entered. Okay, so this was my mail which I entered a, and my password 123456. This is just a random value. Okay, so what happens in the background, let me show you. Okay, so what will happen in the background when I will be writing my email as a and password as 123456, it will be going to select star from users or customers, whatever the table is. The table can be different for different developers. Whatever they need to write, they can write. Customers where email equal to a, sorry, email equal to a and passwords equal to 123456. Okay, so this is how this query will go to the SQL server. Select star from users or customers or anything, like whatever the name of the table is. If the name of the table is users, it will search for users. If the table name is customers, it will search for customers. And this is how the request goes to the SQL server. Okay, so select star from customers where this is this and the password is this. So what if I write this thing, if I write a and this thing. Okay, so if I write this, what will happen is it will go like ctr plus v, and this will be pasted like this. Okay, since this was my input a and a single quote, this was my input, if you can see. So this is how it will go to the server, like select star from users customers where email is this and password is this. If I enter this thing as email, okay, now see, this part looks complete, this part will look complete to the server because it will be exactly like this. This part will look similar, this part will be exact. But when the server will see an extra additional single quote, it will give an error. The error will be key your SQL query has a syntax error. Why the syntax error is there? Because you see you cannot use a special character in between two different fields. So this was the correct thing to write, but if I write my input as that part, so this will go like this, so this will throw an syntax error. Okay, now let's try to write something else as my query. For what if I write my query as a this part, and I write double slash or hash, whatever, I can write anything. So hash or dash, this is used to comment anything. So let's suppose if I write this part, and if I write this part, what will happen is this will happen. Okay, if I input this as my email, what will happen is this thing will happen. So it will see select star from customers where email is a. This part is legit, everything is okay till this part. Then the server will see 2 dash. So what the server will do, that will just comment out everything written after that. So now it will not throw an error because there is no syntax error, and you can write anything in comments. So this will be treated as comments if you write 2 double dash after anything. If that is going to your SQL server, you just need to understand how your query is being treated by the server. Okay, now what if I write this thing as a, and then I write or 1 equals to 1, and then I write 2 double dash. So if I write this thing in my email section, it will look like this. Okay, so what will happen is the server will read select star from customers where email is a, okay, or 1 is equal to 1. So everyone knows about this thing, and an or. So what happens in and an or, if 1 or 1 is 1, 1 or 0 is 1, 0 or 1 is 1, and 0 or 0 is 0. Everyone knows this. A true value and a true value will give a true value in or case. A true and a false value will give a true. A false and a true value will give true, and two false value in or will give a false value. So what it will do is it will try to find an email address which is a. Okay, so there is no email address in this case. Okay, so it will return a false value, this part will return a false value. But there is one more condition, or 1 is equal to 1. What 1 is equal to 1 will do, it will give a true value, and this true and false value is treated between or, and this will give ultimately a true value. So this part will be treated as true, so you will get access to any of the accounts, does not matter what. And if you use 2 comments, everything else will be commented out. There is one more part. Let's suppose the SQL server not only looks for this part but also looks for the password part. So you can write the same thing here. You can write a single quote and you can write or 1 is equal to 1, and it will be treated as a true password in every case. Either your password is true or 1 is equal to 1 true. So this will remain always true. So even if you write a wrong password, this value will be false, but this 1 is equal to 1 value will be true, and you will get access to the SQL. You will be successfully executing your SQL query and you will get access to the account. So this is what was happening here. Okay, so what I wrote was, I wrote a dash or 1, a is equal to a. So a is equal to a, this is the same thing. 1 is equal to 1, b is equal to b, 0 equal to 0. So everything which is equal to which is always true. So what will happen is this thing will be passed, and when I pass this thing, when I forward the request, I will get access. You can see I will get access to account. I don't know whose account is this, but I will get access to this account. When I go to my account section, I will see I am logged in as Vibhuti Shah. And who is this Vibhuti Shah? Sorry. I cannot show who is she. This will be a wrong thing to show who is she. Okay, so I got access to someone else's account, because I didn't show you the thing because it contains her phone number and email address, so I cannot show you that thing. Okay, so this is how you perform an SQL query. Anyone has any doubt with the SQL? There are like different things with what you can do with SQL, but this is one of the basic things, how you can bypass a login. This vulnerability may not present everywhere and not this simple. If present, not this will be not this simple. You need to understand how the code in the backend is processed, and then you need to write like customized queries for that. But this is how the backend works. So do we have a question?
No, Harshita.
Harshit sir,
Yes.
how do we know that these are the how do we know about that particular fields which are available at the database,
Okay.
like username or password? Those can be written in any other name, no?
Okay, no, generally if you are inputting, if you're writing email address, okay, how you can see is, okay, you there are different kinds of SQLs. One is blind SQL, the other is error based SQL, there is union based SQL. So in blind based SQL, what happens is, in blind based SQL you won't get any error from the server. If there is any error in the SQL syntax, the page won't open. You will see an error on the same page, your this is wrong, your password is wrong, your email is wrong, anything. But in error based query, if you write something like this, when I write this thing a dash, sorry, when I write this thing a and dash, it will create an error in the syntax. So if there is an error in the syntax, what I will see is, I will see okay, there is an error in the syntax and the error is in this line. So the server will send you this line, okay, so this is the error where you are making a mistake. So when you are able to generate an error, you will understand, okay, so how is this, how the code is being processed by the server. So what you need to do is, you need to anyhow generate an error from the web application. So this can be stored in a different way. This can be stored in a double quote. So if it is stored in a double quote, you need to write a double quote to generate a like SQL query error, SQL error. What if it is like email and password is being stored in a parenthesis? This may also happen, like this is being stored in a parenthesis. So there are like multiple possibilities. You need to just hit and try until you generate an error. And when you will generate an error, you will see the line where you are creating the error, and when you get this line, everything becomes easy. You know how to exploit these things.
Yes, sir, got you. Thank you.
Okay, so do we have any other question? Okay, let's move to, okay, so union based and the blind based SQL, the same thing. In union based, what we do is, the SQL injection points are not the login parameters, but are the mostly URLs. Okay, how the URLs can be the parameter? Let's suppose you are logged in, let's suppose you log into your bank account. Okay, let's suppose this is your test.bank.com, and then there is this thing, login / account / get ID question mark, user ID equal to anything. Okay, so we see that, okay, this thing is going to the server, this is coming from the server. So there may be a possibility that we may generate an error. Okay, what if I write user ID -1? Okay, so do you think there can be a negative user ID for any user? No, it cannot be. It is 404 not found, this is not. Okay, so what if we write an user ID -1? So the server may generate an error. Okay, so this is the error you are facing, this is not present in the database, or this is the table where you are trying to do something. So in that case, what we will do is, we will try to inject union based things, where you will try to guess everything. In union based SQL, we try to guess everything. Like, okay, suppose there are 3 tables. There are 5 tables. The tables names are user ID, name, phone number, password, and email. Okay, so these are the 5 different tables, but we don't know how many tables are there. So we can try union 1. If I see a response, okay, it is correct. If I write union 2, I see a response. Okay, so like the table number 2 is present. So we will try until we get an error. So we will say, okay, there are 5 different tables. Then we will try something else to get something other data. Then we will try other queries which can be processed by the server to fetch our response. We can just dump the data, we can read the email IDs, we can read passwords. This is how SQL works. And in blind based you won't see anything. In blind based everything is like you will just be able to see the front end part, and you need to try until you bypass that thing. Okay. But do we have any other question regarding cross-site scripting and SQL injection? Then we will move forward to one more topic, and then we will close today's session. Okay, so we don't have any questions. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, so okay, there is one more thing I will be telling you, the parameter tampering. So what a parameter tampering is, so if you can hamper any parameter, if you can change any parameter which is really important for the website developers or the owners, then you can get a good bounty. Let's suppose if I open this thing, if I go here, if I open this thing, I see painted by this user and the price of the item is $500. Okay, what I will do is I will just add this picture to my cart. I will turn the intercept on, I will add this picture to my cart. Okay. So when the request is going to the server, we can see it is a post request, the login, the cookie, the everything other details, and then we see add to cart, the quantity is 1 and the price is $500. So what if we change the price to $5 or $1 or anything and send it to server? So when we forward the request after changing this, we see that our product has been added to the cart, right? So the product has been added and the total price is $1. So if you can do this to any domain or any e-commerce site, you see how much loss they can have. You can order anything for free, even for negative value. So how is this like solved? This is really solved. All the prices which are being shown on the front end on the website should be re-verified by the server. Okay, so if the product price is $500 for this product and it is shown on the website, the server should know that the product is set for $500 and it cannot be changed anyhow. So when I try to change this part, the server should know, okay, this should not be changed, this should be $500. Even if I change that to 1 in my request, the response will come with $500. So this is one more thing which you can see. This is one of the common things you can see in many web applications, and most of the new e-commerce sites, they have this vulnerability. There is the 100% chance that every new website which is related to e-commerce or shopping or food ordering or groceries or any services, they have this vulnerability. If you can find one, you can report this. This is really simple to exploit. You just need to understand how you can do it. And SPF and DMARC records, so this was in the video which I forgot to discuss. So what an SPF record is, SPF record is a sender's policy framework record. Whenever we send a mail, there is the header which goes with every mail. So whenever, like in Burp Suite, whenever we try to go to anywhere, whenever we visit some website, whenever we do something, what we see is we see a request. But this is the header. This is the header which we see. So every mail has this header, but the mail header is not exactly like this. This is for websites. Mail headers look different. You can see mail headers. You can open your Gmail in PC. You can open any mail and you can just right click on the three dots which is on the right top side, and you can go to show original, and when you click on show original you will be able to see the headers and all the other details. You will be able to see the IP address from where the mail came, the other details. So you can verify any mail for genuinity, that it is real or fake, from the headers. So this header is manipulated by the hackers. Hackers, what would they do? They manipulate the headers and they send mails so that mail looks legit. So if we have a SPF and DMARC record, the mail will be we can say that the mail has not been sent from our server, because an SPF record contains let me show this. Okay, so what the mail is, so mail SPF record looks like this: V equals SPF1, IP4 equal to something, and then minus A, MX minus all. This is it's like this is a general format for the SPF record. So what it shows is that the SPF version is 1, and the IP address for the server is this. This is not the IP, like this, suppose 2.3.5.4. So this is the IP for the server. So if there is any mail which is going from this any different server, leaving this, like let's suppose this is for google.com, okay, or let's suppose this is for your college. So let's suppose your college is a website called college.com, and your college has a mail, your principal has a mail like princey@college.com. So let's suppose if I send you a mail from this user ID, your principal's email ID, saying that you have been given a scholarship, and what you need to do is you need to submit 10,000 to avail your scholarship, and that's all. You won't need to pay the fee. So you will say that okay, principal has sent the mail, so I should respond this, and it will be really good that I just need to submit 10,000 and I won't be submitting 1 lakhs for the fee. So you will just click on the link and you will submit 10,000 rupees. So but this mail can be faked if this record is not present with the web server, with this website. This can be faked. What if I send a mail using my IP address, using this email? The IP address will be something different than this. This won't be this, because this is specific to this website. So this is, then we can verify, okay, so if the college mail or this .com is not related anyhow to this IP address, the mail is fake. Got my point? And the DMARC record blocks the emails. Like if you have a DMARC record with this domain, there is a high probability that your mail won't be sent from a different header. With if you change your header and you use this IP address in your header, the mail won't be sent, because it knows that this is specific to this email ID, sorry, this website. Okay, so I will be finishing this. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Okay, do we have any question?
No questions in the Telegram group, Dhawan. And no questions like
Sure.
with the AppOS.
Okay, yes.
Yeah,
Bypassing of OTP comes under which data? SQL injection or
Bypassing the
OTP?
OP, that is there you can, it cannot come under anything. There are different attacks. This can come under like privilege escalation, like you are taking a privilege without doing anything, without bypassing the two-factor authentication. Or this may come under like broken authentication. So what broken authentication is, there is the authentication procedure and you are trying to bypass that. So it can come under anything. Like there are like more than 100 different vulnerabilities and their subcategories. So it won't come under cross-site or SQL, because it is not dealing with your database, neither it is dealing with the front end or the execute. You cannot execute any script using your OTP. So cross-site scripting is only where you can execute some scripts. Okay, so I would suggest everyone to go through this website, leadtime.net XSS Lab 1, or you can just simply type in XSS Lab 1 in Google and try to solve this first link, XSS Lab. We will be discussing this in the next session, XSS Lab. So in XSS Lab, what you need to do is you need to bypass anything. You need to get a pop-up out of here. If you write something and you can see that okay, this thing is getting reflected, okay, this thing is getting reflected. So now you need to inject some scripts here or maybe in the URL, anywhere, however you like, and you need to get a pop-up. If you are getting a pop-up, you have successfully completed a challenge. So I would suggest everyone to do this. And if anyone has good experience with web application, I would suggest him or her to try this OWSP Top 10. This is a new machine on TryHackMe. Came with like it is just a 10 or 11 days old machine. You can try these things. It has OWSP's top 10 vulnerability. You need to exploit everything. You need to exploit injection, you need to exploit command injection, broken authentication, sensitive data exposure. So you can just go to tryhackme.com/room and /OWSP top 10 and you can try this there. I will be discussing the solutions also. If you try this and you try to solve this, and if you cannot, I will discuss the solutions as well. Okay, so thank you for the session. Today I will be leaving the session as of now. Thank you everyone.